Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're well, keeping safe. My name's Richard Enderby. I'm the practice lead for cybersecurity inside CDW UK International. I essentially head up the security practice who design security solutions for our customers. I've got about 25 years experience in IT and security, so I'm well versed with the subjects today. And I'm really happy to be joined by Jason from Palo Alto, who's the field CTO. And Jason's got over 26 years of industry experience as well, including 8 years at GE, 4 at Zscaler, and traditionally known for being an industry expert in secure access, cloud transformation, and business enablement. So, welcome, Jason, to today's call.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Richard.
So I just want to set the scene really and provide a little bit of context for today's discussion and slides that we're going to go through later. If you have any questions throughout this webinar, then please feel free to ask, and we'll look to answer them as soon as we can, either through the presentation or at the end. So let's just see how that goes. So nearly 4 months on, as we're all aware, since lockdown, etc., we're starting to see a return, to the office. But this is still limited in some ways, and with some organisations, still going to be putting in measures for social distancing within the office, and some even stating that the return to the office won't even be till next year. Something that we're seeing quite a lot of. And if I look at Gartner and some of the actual research that they've been doing, no surprises there that 76% of organisations will adopt more remote working for at least 20, 30, 40% of their workforce. And in some cases, going to move at least 50% of their workforce to work from home remotely full time. So we're definitely seeing changes inside the environment today, and no doubt there's going to be changes in the future as well, especially the way how people work. Think about how this move happened to working from home. It was at an unprecedented rate, and in some cases, some organizations have done a really good job of it. It's not something I've actually seen or experienced in over 25 years, so it was definitely new to a lot of us. And typically, you may have found that your organizations or other companies wouldn't have actually had the right systems or have the right measures in place to actually provide remote access for a sustained period of time. So again, would have had DR situations as DR scenarios planned, but definitely not for, continuation of work remotely for 2, 3, 4 months. So this is becoming, definitely a new norm here. So we find ourselves today with a high rate of remote users, accessing applications and data, using a multitude of devices and operating systems, which has increased the actual attack surface significantly. So it's really important that we look to address these challenges, to reduce the risk of a breach or security incident moving forward. And we know it's not easy, hence why I brought Jason onto the call today, who's a field expert in this area. So there are a few of my thoughts. I mean, Jason, from my point of view, what have you seen? What are Palo seeing with regards to some of the challenges and changes that organizations are having to put in place for their users? And how do you see cloud playing a part in this moving forward as well?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. And you're spot on with what you've observed so far through this time. Even before I get started into some of the slides, just some just anecdotal information. It's not anything that we've planned for before. What we're going through, right? We've always kind of had the idea of contingency planning or a pandemic as a lingering thought, and they bubbled up a little bit when avian flu was a thing, 15 years ago or so, or 12 years ago, whatever it was, and swine flu shortly thereafter. And there've been little things that have percolated, but maybe impacted certain geographies, but not necessarily a global pandemic. But even then, when we were looking at how we would respond and apply technology to solve those challenges, it wasn't ever looked at as this could be semi-permanent. It was, we have a period of time we're going to have to get over, and we're going to scale out our environment to accommodate that as best we can to get us over a hump. That's likely, building out VPN infrastructure, whatever we have, but then also a subset of tools that could be used remotely or for a mobile user or a remote worker. But now, everything with this has completely changed our approach to planning for something like this. Where it went from being Let's get executives email and an app or two, and then this team over here an app or two. It's now like we need to figure out productivity, on a full-time basis. So, with that, I guess I'll jump right in. But, in general, when we look at what the cloud has done and how it's affected the mobile worker so far, it's been a good thing, right? It is modernized and increased productivity overall, right? We're talking about things that are resources that are on demand, something that is as available at home or on the go as it is in the office, right? And even sometimes a better experience for the mobile worker. But the elasticity of an application, one thing I'll talk about a little bit here is I talk to C-levels all the time. It's part of my job. And, we were talking for the last few months up until probably about 5 weeks ago about making sure everybody can get on and get working again, right? And now for the mobile or remote user. And I talk a little bit about, well, where's the money going to go, or where's it coming from? And it's all a matter of shifting, right? They've had to shift priorities around to be able to accommodate scaling out these remote access environments. But eventually that money's got to go back to some projects. And what's been revealed over this time is the applications that have remained static in data centers that they thought maybe we couldn't move or we shouldn't move. They may be a little too touchy. Well, that touchiness and that stale aspect of those applications has introduced risk into these organizations. They have said, you know what, we can't really leave these applications in a data center because when everybody's accessing them at peak times of the day over long haul VPN connections, performance is terrible, right? We can't do this. It's almost unusable for a large percent of the organization. So now we have to reprioritize cloud, but instead of it being some of the low hanging fruit and the easier applications to move out to cloud and SaaS, we're actually going to take the ones that we have to move because they are critical to our business and they have to be available if users do not come back into the office again. So that's one big thing that is absolutely shifted. But then, what it's always done is created the when and where flexibility, right? If you've got a workforce, and a perfect example is software developers, right? They kind of pick their own hours. They're not at all 8 to 5, 9 to 6 type people. They are, 10 to 3, 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. They've got different things going on. But then look at things now with children being home and the workforce needing to be a little more flexible to accommodate everybody being home, right? It may not be that we can have a traditional work day, right? But that gives us, being remote gives us that flexibility. And then mobile devices, right? When a lot of these organizations started sending people home, they didn't have laptops to give everybody, right? A lot of people still work on desktops in an office. So when people are being sent home, they're using their home PCs or a mobile device of some sort, whether that be a tablet or a phone, to access certain enterprise applications. Well, if your enterprise apps are sitting in a data center because they're homegrown, you don't typically have a mobile app for that, right? But when you have something that's delivered as a SaaS, you do. So all three of these things have been a benefit up until COVID-19, but have been an even greater benefit through it. So cloud has absolutely been a game changer thus far for the industry, but it has significantly helped what we're trying to tackle, the challenges we're trying to face together right now through COVID-19. And so as you alluded to too, Gartner has some stats. They've been doing some research. I think everybody's doing research on this. What is this really going to mean? 451 Research put some statistics out there just very recently that, 2/3 of organizations are going to keep a work from home policy in place, right? And that is whether that's 1 day a week, whether it's 4 days a week, every day, depending on your job, right? Depending on what you have to do in that office, working from home is going to be here to stay for at least the foreseeable future. Reducing office capacity. This has always been something, there's two sides of this equation with every executive I talk to. There's one side that is, I don't know if I trust my users to work from home all the time, right? The other side, from the business operations, the chief operating officer perspective, is we spend a whole lot of money on commercial real estate. And if there's ever a way to do that, that was the original premise of teleworking and sending home these at home Soho modems and VPN devices was we can create a full-time teleworker type thing and start to shrink down office space. Never materialized. You had pockets here and there, but it really never came to be. But now roughly half of all organizations are really looking at this as an opportunity, because that first side that I talked about of not really trusting employees to be able to work from home has been disproven. They can do it. They can do it effectively and productively. So now it's like, how do we reap some of the reward of this? Well, we can do it by getting some money back out of our environment. Obviously, when these long-term contracts start to go, or they can restructure them, whatever it is, and put that money back into the business as innovation. Instead of spending it on operations to just literally keep lights on, it is something that they can redirect into funding the business. But then, I guess if I even, this was a stat that I could verify in talking to customers all the time, but the full-time remote, a lot of organizations had about 10% of their workforce that was deemed full-time remote. They didn't live near an HQ or an office. I mean, like, look at me, I'm full-time remote. I don't live anywhere near our HQ, and Chicago does not have, there's no Palo Alto Chicago office. So, I'm considered full-time remote. But given this situation, that 10% number is probably going to go to 30% for most organizations. And that's very close to what I've been hearing, is that they're probably going to triple the amount of workers that can full-time be remote, whatever that number may be. It could be 10% for some organizations, 20% for others, but all in all, it's here to stay. So this is what we have to plan for, because this is a shift in business. This is a shift in productivity and the way things are being done, but they can't do it successfully unless they have the right tools in place, right? And that's where we start to talk about, how do we get users on safely and at scale? So, thinking back to where things were just a little while ago, 4.5 months ago, it's kind of what the challenge was we were all solving for. We had some people working from home, some people working from anywhere and, on the go, and then everybody else was in an office. But it really looks something like this now. And whatever your company calls it, whether it's flex work, like that's what we call it, Palo or whatever. But this is what I was talking about before. It's being productive full time. Right? It's having access to all of your applications securely, from a place that's not the office. When we took for granted things like, maybe some organizations had implemented network access control. You connect to the Wi-Fi in the office, you're immediately authenticating or something, or there's a device qualification that happens before you can attach. All of that goes away with remote access. You're given a client, you launch it, you log into that client, but the device itself is different, right? The behavior of the device is different. And if you're not doing any type of device posturing or things like that, you could run into some challenges. So this has really opened up, a different way of looking at what we have to solve for these days. But, if you look at it from a user productivity perspective, when we were planning for some of these things, these other, potential pandemics like the avian or swine flu, like I said, it was really about what apps do they need to get them by for a few days, a couple of weeks, knowing that we're going to return to normal in the very near future. So it's just kind of planning for an emergency and what are the critical assets that somebody needs. But at the time too, think about the way we were working. There was a lot of phone calls. There was there was office collaboration, but nothing like it's been the last 10 years, where some offices have designed their worker seating arrangements to be pods, right? So they're full-time collaborating. And those that aren't in that office, there's always some type of video or web conference going on, whether it's Zoom or Teams or WebEx, whatever it may be in use. There's always real-time collaboration happening. And so when you look at what it's going to take to keep users fully productive during these times, it's a lot different. It's a much different equation that we're trying to solve. And with that comes scale concerns. And that's the biggest thing that we've been hearing. It's scalability, both from being able to get users on and working productively. But also when we talk about remote access, exactly, we can't ignore the security side of that. And that's an incredibly important piece that we can't just gloss over or get back to later, especially when we're talking about things like potential third parties or contractors that are connecting into our environments. That's security cannot be an afterthought when it comes to that anymore. So, these are some of the things that we're looking at as part of that shift, as the remote worker paradigm has shifted to more working from home for the foreseeable future, or permanent working from home for some, the attack surface has increased. You hit the spot on, Richard. Every device is attached to the internet directly. There's no private lines being installed. Nobody's going out and installing, this is going to date us, but ISDN lines back in people's homes, where it's just a direct, essentially high-speed dial-up going on. So there's now, you don't have to worry about that exposure. But if you look at it from internet gateway perspective, say your organization has 2 or 3 remote, internet egress gateways in your organization, maybe 1, but then you send maybe 5,000 people home and they're working from home. You have 5,000 internet gateways. They may be attaching to something that's VPN sending all traffic through, but you've increased that exposure significantly. The piece I was talking about before, capacity versus security. Get them on and get them working. That was a thing that everybody was concerned with the first, I'd say 2.5 months, 2.5, 3 months of this, going back and trying to tackle security. We try to talk a lot of organizations out of that. Like, look, you can't, because what happens, right? Every time we talk about networking and then security to follow, security is never as good as we needed it to be in the first place, right? So can we figure out a way to help you through this now so that you're not making this trade-off? Because what started happening very quickly was, okay, they were getting users on and working from home, but then they were splitting a whole lot of traffic off, right? Doing this split tunnel, split VPN situation, which, okay, for cloud and SaaS, that makes sense from a capacity perspective and a user experience perspective, but now you're introducing a whole lot of risk, right? If you're sending this traffic direct and your VPN tunnel is configured to only send traffic across the VPN tunnel that's destined for that data center, you're opening yourself up to what I would, jokingly call shadow IT 2.0, but essentially you're just saying, I don't have time to worry about this right now. And so depending on that endpoint too, right? We talk about defense in depth, where you got endpoint security, you got inline security, and then you got destination security, which could be a combination of host and application. If you're not controlling the endpoint, or not controlling it as well as you could be, and you don't have inline security, now you're fully reliant on host-based security on the others, or application-based security on the other side, which is typically a problem when it comes to detecting malware, detecting data loss and things like that. Inline data in motion is what we're trying to solve for in most cases, because that's where a lot of the threats are identified best, right? Instead of out of band or some type of, direct access, but then something's trying to catch it on a, alert and notify type position. It's not good for security at all. But then the final piece of this is increased risk of theft, both from a physical device perspective, because they're not being used. The endpoint is not being used in an office that has some security controls around it. It's being used at home, or somebody's is on the go, and so they got to take their device somewhere. But then credential theft as well, right? If somebody isn't connecting to that VPN and they're using their single sign-on all the time, and or re-signing into certain things that are web-based, and you have something running on your device like a bot, all of a sudden now you've exposed yourself to credential theft risk. So it's a whole lot of challenge that we're really trying to get through and figure out what's the best way to go. And this is leaving leaders concerned, right? So everybody's sitting here with the same understanding of, we got to change something, we have to do something. But then the questions pop up, right, in the backs of our leaders' minds saying, how do I mitigate what I don't know, right? How do I solve for that? How do I make sure what we're doing from the security perspective isn't killing that productivity benefit that I talked about? Because thinking about sending all users back into a centralized, let's just say VPN, for then inspection of that traffic, because VPN doesn't have inherent security. It's usually relying on something downstream from the VPN concentrator once the user hits the gateway. But if you send everybody into that remote access gateway, then through the internet gateway, all of those benefits of, localized content and elasticity of an application, essentially available everywhere, and from a SaaS perspective, those benefits are diminished, right? And so that tends to kill the productivity gains that we've been making this whole time. And then costs, right? How do I stay cost neutral while still moving forward? We know we need to solve for zero trust network access. I don't have money to do it right now, right? I pulled in some money to get users on and working. I have to figure out how to get that money back to the projects I took it from, but I still need to continue to move forward on the security path. Now, some budgets we've been told will expand on the security side. Others, you have it now, figure it out, because you're not going to have additional budget later. So you trying to get this right now is much better than trying to band-aid this thing and then band-aiding it next year and the next year. And before you know it, things just they're not cohesive. They're not, things start falling apart as far as, comprehensive policy application to all users, consistent security posture and approach. All those things tend to get harmed as time goes on if you don't address them right away. So that's where we tend to say, look, there's a right way of doing this, and this is with a platform. A platform-based approach can help you with this, right? When unpredictable typically means scale, right? We went from 10% of our workforce to 85% of our workforce is remote. How do we plan for this, right? Platform-based approaches, right, that have scaling abilities built in. Not something you have to worry about, adding later, figuring out how to, beef up infrastructure. That's not sustainable. You're going to spend a whole lot of money and you're going to give a lot of that capacity back. Not all of it because of the changing, the shift in paradigm, but you will be giving some of it back. You want to be able to have an always on posture, right? Because if you think about sending all traffic to an inspection zone, well, that's the most secure way to do it. The issue has always been, well, if we have this always on posture and we're going to 1 or 2 gateways around the world, maybe 3 or 4, whatever it is, but we've got employees all over the planet, that performance is going to be terrible. So we just can't do it, right? We can't have an always on posture. It just doesn't work for our business. Users can't work that way. But maybe they could if their remote access solution was distributed and cloud-based, things like that. And then making sure you can stay cost neutral. When you take a platform-based approach instead of a point product approach, it's not add about products. It is, I have a platform. How do I apply it to this use case and this use case and that use case? The right platform, you can solve for multiple use cases in a single investment. That's the point. So you extract the greater long-term value out of a platform-based approach rather than a point product-based approach. So these are the conversations we're having, that I'm having, and trying to advise C-levels on all the time. So how do we address these, at Palo, to solve these today's challenges with a new approach? We need to make sure that we are providing that efficient path between users and cloud. Cloud includes SaaS in this case, but making sure that they have that fast experience, that kind of traditional work from anywhere experience, on-demand scale, making sure that we don't have to have boxes and infrastructure stacked and ready to go in case we need it, or calling somebody to say, hey, I've got an event going on, can you please increase my scale or capacity for it, or I don't know how much longer I'm going to need this, but on-demand scale, and then complete visibility and inspection of all user traffic. Those that are not inspecting remote access traffic right now, you got to start, right? This is not something that's going to go away. This is not something that you can take for granted. If you're an organization that had things like taps throughout the certain parts of the network, the user's not on that network anymore. You're losing that visibility. You're losing that ability to do forensics on what the user behavior is, both from a challenging perspective, user context and validation, but then what are they doing when they're accessing the application? What does that session actually look like? If you're not looking within that session itself, you're setting yourself up for some significant issue, right? Some potentially catastrophic issues if data loss becomes a problem, or the ability for a bad actor to upload malware to a host. Things like that could then spread, right? Could go north or south to north, and then east to west. These are things that you have to be able to mitigate. So that our approach here at Palo is using Prisma Access. Prisma Access is our SASE, or Secure Access Service Edge, which I'll talk more about momentarily. At the end of the day, it's a Gartner term, right? But it's the right one for the right reasons. But our approach includes scaling out and delivering secure connectivity at the edge for internet access, remote worker access, remote location or site access, and third parties. right? So it's taking the approach of what you would normally have to tackle with several point products like a secure web gateway, a VPN or software-defined perimeter, an SD-WAN or wide area network approach or wide area network approach, and then a third-party remote access environment, inspection zone, extranet, whatever you want to call it. It's taking all of these access approaches and combining them into just access. It's just a means of a consumer, which is a user of some sort, accessing a resource. And then everything just flows through Prisma Access. So this is our approach to solving this problem. It's our product, that solves this problem, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But as we were talking about, or as I was talking about, some of the issues with traditional VPNs, this is what our customers that are calling us for and who I'm talking to every day are trying to solve, right? They've got VPN gateways centralized within their data center. They've got this hairpin for cloud and SaaS traffic. It's coming into the VPN, then right back out instead of it being a more linear approach. There's no inline security inspection of VPN traffic at all. That's across the board from both your traditional VPNs and software-defined perimeter solution. There's a zero trust element there that I'll talk about, but it's not complete. But then there's a split tunneling aspect too, right? To try to increase some of that productivity or performance for that remote worker. Third parties and contractors, accessing this environment. When we talk about something like no inline security, it was one thing if it was, we had some contractors that were, they had access to our building, so there was better monitoring in terms of what they were doing and what we could see them doing. But if they're all remote too, now we're really facing some significant challenge, right? Because we don't see them, right? And if we're not controlling that endpoint either, because they're not our endpoints to control, we've lost that whole element of defense in depth without inline inspection of traffic. So one approach is, like I talked about brought up momentarily or a moment ago, was a software-defined perimeter approach, this is what a lot of organizations are looking at to change away from traditional VPN. Why? Because it's got that zero trust network access branding to it, which is not really true. And I'll explain why. It's more secure than VPN because you're doing a user validation challenge, right? You're saying somebody's trying to connect to a resource and we are not going to allow access to that resource until we verify who they are. So we get full user context. Are they who they say they are through authentication and what they know? Are they on the device we expect them to be? Are they in the location we expect them to be? And if any of one of those factors is wrong or off, you either don't grant access to the resource or they get a scaled down version of access, right? Maybe it's just, instead of being able to have full access to an application, you can only view it, or you can only download but not upload, whatever it is. But you have adaptive access capabilities. So it's certainly better than VPN. But where I have this illustrated here is there's still no inline inspection of traffic. It doesn't matter who the SDP is. And there's Gartner, I think, has a list of 20 or 22 of them out there. They're all the same. It's better than VPN, but they're still not inspecting traffic. And that's a problem. They're not inspecting it at any layer, especially layer 7. And I'll equate that to something for those that want the example. If you think about when we were traveling, right? We were traveling around. I was traveling weekly. A lot of us do that for our jobs. Those of us on the vendor side, others on the customer side do too. But when we did that, imagine now, okay, so I've got my bags, I've got a backpack or a suitcase, I've got my ID, and then I've got a boarding pass. And say I go to the Borders and Customs officer, present that boarding pass and ID, they scan it on the Penta scanner, get a green check and say, okay, you're good to go. You don't even have to go through the rest of the security line. You can go straight to the lounge, straight to your plane, whatever you want to do, or the duty-free shop, have it all. And for a second, you might say, well, that's kind of nice. That's convenient. I kind of like this. This is quick and easy. Immediately, though, you start wondering, well, if they're doing this for me, they're doing this for others, potentially a lot of others, right? I trust what I put in my bag, but they have no idea what I put in my bag. I have no idea what this person next to me has in their, or behind me has in their bag, right? And if they don't either, we're all in trouble, right? Something bad is going to get through. So where Palo is different, our approach is full zero trust network access, which is making sure that you do that inspection of the user, that validation of the user, but then you also inspect the payload, right? You're taking the next step, put the bag on the belt, run it through the bag scanner, walk through the metal detector or body scanner. Now we're looking at the payload. If you're not doing both of those things, you're only partial trust, right? You're zero trust from the user perspective. So you don't trust before, but then you are trusting after. Because once that session's then established through that software-defined perimeter solution, there's nothing to stop malicious download. If I'm a bad user, like a bad insider, and the insider threat is more the target here, but if I'm one of those bad inside users, and I start exfiltrating data that I actually have access to and the ability to download by policy due to my job, but I'm using it for malicious purposes, there's nothing the software-defined perimeter solution can do to stop that. Right. So, or maybe I have access to a directory, but directory permissions get messed up somewhere down the line. And so now I have access to a whole lot more than I should have. And now I can actually start viewing things that I shouldn't. And now pulling data down. Again, if there's no inline inspection, you can't stop that from happening. You're dead in the water. Same with a malware upload. Software-defined perimeters are a layer 7 connection. It's user to application. There's no IP addressing being talked about. So most malware fails in its ability to go from an endpoint to a host in a software-defined perimeter session. That's a good thing. So again, that's where it's more secure than a VPN. The issue is, again, bad actor. I'm looking to upload malware to a host to create backend infection across a service rail, or to the next user that connects up the right way. If I can upload malware to an application or affect that application to where they do their job normally, and that malware finds its way back down as part of a download that they were able to do through policy. Now, all of a sudden, we've got to break out another way. Again, it just gets back to full inspection of the session is how you integrate security with access, right? So our approach is it starts with zero trust network access from the beginning, but then it includes other things like cloud scale, right? We use a public cloud service to deliver Prisma access. So we have the ability to scale it up as needed automatically through the cloud's own hyperscale and APIs that are monitoring thresholds. Things happen. A large bandwidth event happens. We scale up the customer instance. When it's over, we descale and give it back. Highly efficient, very sustainable use of cloud services. No hairpins, when it comes to getting that inspection done. If you're connecting to a security cloud that can route a user to the destination no matter what it is, data center, cloud, SaaS, or web, all that routing is being done by the cloud. No need to hairpin anything, and no need to split tunnel traffic, right? So now you get away from that need or requirement to improve performance by split tunneling and offloading that capacity, because you've now distributed your VPN head ends around the world, or at least more than what you would typically have in your environment today. Now, if you're a centralized organization, in country, right? You're in country, one gateway, you don't have a lot to worry about, in terms of poor performance to certain SaaS or localized content, because the content's probably local already. But when you think about longer haul users, or if a lot of your workloads are in the US, even though they're being returned in your source language, that long haul across the internet, is going to be poor performance in a lot of cases, where something like a cloud delivered service where you can leverage their own network for transit is going to improve performance, greatly. So it's just making sure you pick the right architecture when it comes to solving both the performance, user experience issue, and the security issue at the same time, because not all next gen remote access solutions, talking about software defined perimeters, are the same. You need something that has that inline security inspection, because you can't always control the endpoint and you can't always control the destination. So if you don't have inline inspection somewhere, you've got no inspection really happening, and that's a challenge. So when we talk about, what a cloud native SASE is, and going back to now, I said I'd talk a little bit about what SASE is. Here we go. So SASE, it's nothing more than an acronym, right? It's an acronym for the right reasons. Gartner in August 2019 said, to essentially the vendors like us, Cisco, others, get your stuff together, right? You provide network as a service services. You provide security as a service. Why don't you converge those two? Why? Because with cloud adoption being what it is, users being more mobile than ever, right? And now we're talking almost a year ago that this was going on. That common connectivity is the internet, and for 60% of enterprise traffic. So why are you, segregating networking from security when it should just be built in, not bolted on, or not after the fact? Totally agree with that. That's actually why I'm at Palo. As part of Richard's introduction, I was at Zscaler for 4 years. I fully agree that, security needs to be built in and not an afterthought, no matter what you're accessing across your organization. The network just has to evolve. The network traditionally has been plumbing, you just get user to destination. Security has been another side of the house, a different organization, a different structure, a different set of rules, and they try to implement controls after the fact. If you have security embedded with the network, it's there. Right? It's not something you have to go back for. You have to tweak your policies, but it's not something you have to go figure out later. It's just there. So that's the idea of a SASE. But they're not all created equally either, right? You need something that's globally distributed, right? You need something that's got as many locations as possible, not just for you, right? That's not just because you may be in country and your resources are in country, but if you're in country, but then you've got a multinational organization also in country hitting the same area, that's saturation. Wouldn't you want their users to be as close to in the US, in parts of Asia, in the Middle East, other countries within Europe, South America, getting them to connect in to their environment over a distributed environment is better for you as well, right? It takes that capacity impact off of you. Firewall-based architectures, I think, are better, mainly because they can inspect everything. There's no limitation on their inspection abilities. Like certain other technologies or architectures, like proxy-based architectures, are limited to what they can expect. You have to be a proxy-aware protocol: web, secure web, FTP, or DNS. If you're not one of those four, and I'm even talking like tunneling within them, but if you're not one of those four, it can't be inspected. It'll have to be bypassed. And that's dangerous, as more and more usage of the internet is not just web-based. A lot of back-end protocols for things like Office 365 and stuff, they're not web-based protocols. In lift and shift of applications from data center to cloud, you're not webifying every application you move. So you need something that can inspect everything. That's a firewall-based architecture. Single pass architectures for efficiency, the ability to decrypt and inspect traffic at scale. Customer isolation, making sure that your instance is your instance. It's more like an infrastructure as a service in the cloud, or a VPC in the cloud of security, not a full multi-tenant environment where you could have not just commingling of data, but also sharing of resources that you're connecting to, load balancing and things like that, to where if one customer does have a high bandwidth event, you're impacted. That shouldn't be the way. Multi-tenant management obviously makes a lot of sense, but then cloud scale, right? Like I said before, the ability to scale out as needed, high bandwidth event, scale back when you don't. Right? Give those resources back to the pool in use so that somebody else that needs it can use it. On and on we go. So this is really what we're doing, right? We're solving the needs of today's leaders with this approach, this platform, which is Prisma Access, that is embedding security with the network, and it's delivering high performance access to services at scale, right? With the security built in. So secure, scalable remote access is happening. We're helping with network transformation. Today's focus was the remote worker, but for those branches that do need direct internet access securely, but not just direct internet access to the internet, but better access to also cloud, SaaS, and the data center, right? We can embed security in that as well. When you send all traffic through this type of platform, you eliminate your visibility gaps, right? When it's not one product for this, one product for that, one product for this, and you hope you've got enough policy orchestration to see all of it. If it's all the same policy, all the same platform, you do see all of it. And same policy, same platform, obviously leads to operational efficiency. One interface to manage your policy on, one way to deploy firewall rule sets, one way to look at security and change, right? If you're getting into automation and you need to write rules that are going to institute a policy block based on a behavior or a quarantine, it's a whole lot easier to do that across a common language, a common operating language of the security, the censoring, than it would be if you had 3 or 4 or 5 different censoring types going on. And then cost control and optimization. Like I said, if you're using Prisma Access for remote workers, but then you can expand it to the branch, then you can expand it to third parties. You know, you're leveraging the same platform, the same investment to solve these other use cases as well, right? So you can consolidate and rationalize tools, which is making things easier on everybody. So Richard, with that, that concludes the slides I wanted to get through today. I'm happy to answer any questions that may have come in.
Yes, that's fantastic, Jason. There's no questions at the moment, so if anyone's got any questions, then please do post them, and we'll answer them. Mm-hmm. We'll give it a few seconds to see if anything comes up.
Sure.
But just want to say, whilst we're waiting, Jason, fantastic presentation there. Definitely one of the most relevant conversations that we're having with customers today. It is no doubt that these changes that we're seeing or have seen over the past 2 or 3 months are here to stay and are going to stay this way for quite a while. So definitely very relevant topic there.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this too. It's funny. I mentioned to Helen because she started in my previous employer right as I was leaving, and as I was traveling all the time, like I said, I travel weekly for work, and a lot of people think, wow, that's really busy, and it was. But I'll tell you, I've never been busier in my entire career than I've been the last 3 months for this very reason, right? This is on everybody's mind. Everybody has to solve for this. There's not a single organization other than, your mom and pops or your very small local businesses that are trying to solve for this problem, right? So everybody is trying to figure something out around this. And you're right. It's never been more relevant, and it's the most relevant topic out there today, for sure.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned it earlier as well about obviously you've never been so busy. I've actually not been so busy. 16, 17 weeks at home. I've probably been more productive, and I'm sure it's the same for a lot of our customers. Have been more productive in that time than they have been in a long time. Yeah. So with that productivity, obviously there's obviously introduced a layer of risk, and there's obviously a new threat landscape that's obviously evolved because of that. So it's obviously great to see that partnering with Palo Alto as we do, that you're addressing this space in such a good way, in such a such a relevant way, really.
That's right. Well, yeah, and it's funny. I think there's the other side of this, that there are plenty of people that do want to get back to an office at some point.
Yeah,
just because it's mad, right? It's mad at home. Yeah. Your kids have been home too, right? And they're still home, right? Because now we have summer break, and it's completely different than if we were just like I said, I'm full-time remote, but it's still different, right? Because everybody's home. It's not just me, right? Everybody's home, and it's a completely different scenario.
Yeah, no, fully get that. I'm fully remote as well, so we'll see what happens in the next 3 to 4 months. But
indeed,
yes, thanks for your time.
Yeah, sure. Happy to participate. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, that's great. No questions have come in, so just to wrap up with everyone, just want to say thanks for your time today. If you do need questions, then please let us know. The contact details are on the actual presentation, as you can see, and we'll upload this and get this out to everyone. Just from a CDW perspective, dedicated security practice, team of 6, having these conversations day in, day out, so the guys can understand the challenges, the risks out there, and obviously we're addressing it using a range of solutions, obviously Palo Alto being at the forefront of that, where secure access is concerned. So just thanks for your time, and stay safe and keep well.
Indeed.
Thank you.